Have you ever noticed how life sometimes pauses, just for a moment, as if the universe itself is holding its breath, waiting for you to understand something? A door closes without warning. A plan falls apart. A relationship slips through your fingers. And in that silent space between what you hoped for and what actually happens, a strange question rises from the depths of your heart. Is there something bigger at work here? Is there something bigger at work here? Or am I simply lost? And just as you begin to feel alone in that uncertainty, a quiet whisper seems to echo through existence itself, telling you to wait, to listen, and above all, to trust. Because there is a rhythm moving through your life right now, even if you cannot see it, a silent current beneath the surface of your struggles, guiding you through moments that feel chaotic, random, and sometimes unbearably painful. You may call it destiny, divine timing, God's will, or simply the unfolding of the universe. But whatever name you give it, it carries the same gentle message. Nothing in your life is truly accidental. Think back to a time when everything seemed to be falling apart. Perhaps you lost an opportunity you were certain was meant for you. Perhaps someone you loved walked away, or perhaps a dream you held close to your heart simply dissolved into nothing. In those moments, it feels like standing in a storm without shelter, the wind of uncertainty pushing against your chest, the rain of doubt soaking into your soul, and your mind begins to ask, why would this happen to me? Why would God allow this pain? Why would the universe take away something I cared so deeply about? Yet time has a mysterious way of answering questions we once believed would remain forever unanswered. Weeks later, months later, sometimes years later, you begin to see something you could never see while standing inside the storm. You realize that the door that closed was protecting you from a path that would have led to greater suffering. The loss that once shattered you was quietly making space for something far more aligned with your soul. And the delay you once resented was actually preparing you, strengthening you, shaping you into the person you needed to become. This is the paradox of trust. We are asked to believe in a plan that we cannot see, to walk forward on a road that is not fully illuminated, to surrender control in a world that constantly tells us to hold on tighter. And this is why trusting the universe, trusting God, is not a passive act. It is one of the most courageous choices a human being can make. Because trust requires you to stand at the edge of uncertainty and still say, I believe there is meaning here. It asks you to sit in silence when answers do not come quickly. It invites you to release the illusion that you must control every outcome, every timeline, every detail of your life. And this is where many hearts struggle. We are taught to plan, to predict, to manage every possibility. We want guarantees before we take a step forward. We want proof before we surrender. But life does not operate like a contract with fixed terms. It flows more like a river, sometimes calm, sometimes wild, always moving toward a destination we cannot fully comprehend. Imagine a child learning to walk. The child does not analyze every step, or calculate every risk. They move forward with an innocent trust, a quiet knowing that even if they fall, someone will be there to catch them. That kind of trust is not foolish. It is deeply wise. It recognizes that falling is not failure, it is part of the journey. In the same way, the universe does not demand perfection from you. It does not require you to have all the answers before you move forward. It simply asks you to keep walking, even when the path is unclear, to keep believing, even when circumstances seem to contradict your faith. There is a verse that echoes this truth across centuries, whispering to every anxious heart. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. Notice how it does not say trust when everything makes sense. It does not say trust only when outcomes are favorable. It says trust even when your understanding is incomplete. Because your perspective is limited by time, by emotion, by the narrow view of the present moment. But the divine perspective sees the entire tapestry of your life, every thread of joy and sorrow woven together into something meaningful. Sometimes what feels like rejection is actually redirection. Sometimes what feels like loss is actually protection. Sometimes what feels like delay is actually preparation. And sometimes what feels like darkness is simply the universe inviting you to discover a deeper kind of light within yourself. You may not realize it yet, but every challenge you have faced has been shaping you, teaching you patience, strengthening your faith, expanding your capacity to love, and deepening your connection with something greater than yourself. Even the moments when you felt completely alone, when you cried silently at night, when you questioned your worth, when you wondered if anyone truly understood your pain, even those moments were not empty. They were sacred spaces where your soul was quietly being refined, where your spirit was learning resilience, where your heart was being prepared to hold greater peace. Trusting the universe does not mean pretending that pain does not exist. It does not mean ignoring your fears or denying your struggles. It means acknowledging them, feeling them fully, and still choosing to believe that they are not the final chapter of your story. It means looking at uncertainty and saying, I may not know where this road leads, but I trust that I am being guided. It means surrendering the need to control every outcome and embracing the deeper peace that comes from faith. And when you begin to live with this kind of trust, something remarkable happens within you. Anxiety begins to loosen its grip. The constant tension in your mind starts to soften. You stop fighting against the flow of life, and instead, you begin to move with it. You realize that you are not carrying the weight of your journey alone. There is an unseen support holding you, a divine intelligence, orchestrating events beyond your understanding, a quiet presence walking beside you even in your darkest moments. So when life feels uncertain, when answers seem distant, when the future appears clouded, remember this gentle truth. The universe is not working against you. It is working through you, shaping you, guiding you, and preparing you for something greater than you can currently imagine, and even if you cannot see the destination yet. And even if you cannot see the destination yet, even if the road feels lonely, even if doubt whispers in your mind, held on to this simple, powerful reminder. What is meant for you will never pass you by. What is meant to grow, you will always find you. And what is meant to bless you is already making its way toward your life. So breathe deeply. Release your fear and allow yourself to trust, because sometimes the greatest act of faith is simply believing that even in the silence, even in the waiting, even in the uncertainty, God is still working, and your story is still unfolding exactly as it should. And as you begin to loosen your grip on the need to control every outcome, you may notice something subtle, almost invisible at first, a quiet shift happening inside you. The constant noise of worry does not disappear overnight, but it starts to soften, like a stag slowly losing its strength as it moves away from the shore. You begin to realize that so much of your suffering was never caused by life itself, but by your resistance to the way life unfolds. Think of how often the mind whispers, things should be different. It argues with reality, fights against what has already happened, clings desperately to what it cannot keep. And in doing so, it creates a tension that drains your spirit. But the moment you begin to trust, truly trust, something remarkable occurs. You stop fighting against the current, and instead you begin to float with it. Imagine standing in the ocean, trying to push back the waves with your bare hands. No matter how strong you are, the waves will continue to come. They do not respond to your frustration or your fear. But when you allow yourself to relax, when you stop resisting, you discover that the same waves you once fought against can carry you effortlessly. Life moves in a very similar way. The universe is not asking you to control the tides. It is asking you to learn how to move with them. And this is not weakness. This is wisdom. Because when you surrender to the flow of life, you are not giving up your power. You are aligning with a deeper power that has always been guiding you. There was once a person who spent years chasing a dream that seemed perfect on the surface. They worked tirelessly, sacrificing rest, relationships, and even their own peace of mind to achieve what they believed would finally make them happy. But just as they came close to reaching that goal, everything collapsed. Opportunities vanished. Plans failed, and they were left standing in the silence of disappointment, feeling as though all their effort had been wasted. For a long time, they could not understand why. They felt abandoned by life, betrayed by their own hopes. But as months passed, something unexpected happened. They began to rediscover parts of themselves they had neglected. They found joy in simple moments again. They reconnected with people who truly cared about them, and they slowly realized that the dream they had chased was never aligned with their true purpose. Years later, they look back on that painful collapse, not as a tragedy, but as a turning point that saved them from a life that would have left them empty. What once felt like the universe closing a door was actually the universe gently redirecting their path. And this is one of the most mysterious truths about trust. What feels like destruction in the moment is often a form of divine protection. The universe sees paths you cannot see. It understands consequences you cannot yet imagine. And sometimes The only way it can guide you toward what is meant for you is by removing what is not. But when you are standing inside loss, this truth can feel almost impossible to accept. The heart does not immediately see hidden blessings. It feels pain first, confusion first, grief first. And this is natural. Trusting the universe does not mean suppressing your emotions. It means allowing yourself to feel them fully while still holding on to the quiet belief that they are not meaningless. There is a sacred patience in this kind of trust, a willingness to wait without knowing when answers will arrive, a strength that comes from believing that even in the absence of clarity, there is still a purpose unfolding. And perhaps this is why so many spiritual teachings speak of surrender, not as defeat, but as a doorway to peace. But as a doorway to peace. When you surrender, you release the exhausting illusion that you must carry everything alone. You allow yourself to rest in the understanding that there is a wisdom far greater than your own, guiding the intricate details of your life. Consider how a seed grows beneath the soil. From the outside, it looks like nothing is happening. There is no visible progress, no immediate results, no sign of life. But beneath the surface, something extraordinary is taking place. The seed is breaking open, transforming, preparing itself to rise into the light. In many ways, your life moves through similar hidden seasons. There are times when it feels as though nothing is changing, when your prayers seem unanswered, when your efforts appear unnoticed. Yet in those quiet periods, the universe is working within you, strengthening your roots, preparing you for a growth that will one day become visible. If the seed could speak, it might feel as though it was buried and forgotten. It might question why it was placed in darkness. But that darkness is not punishment. It is preparation. It is the environment that allows transformation to occur. And so it is with your struggles. The moments that feel like being buried by life are often the moments when your soul is quietly expanding, when your faith is deepening, when your inner strength is being shaped. Trusting the universe means believing that even when you cannot see progress, growth is still happening. Even when you feel lost, you are still being guided. Even when life seems silent, it is still speaking to you in ways you may not yet understand. You may notice this truth in your own journey. Think of a time when you were forced to wait, when you had no choice but to be patient. Perhaps you felt frustrated, wondering why things were moving so slowly. But later, you realized that if events had unfolded sooner, you would not have been ready. You would not have had the wisdom, the maturity, or the strength to handle what came next. The waiting was not wasted time. It was preparation. And this realization can change the way you experience uncertainty. Instead of seeing it as an enemy, you begin to see it as a teacher. Instead of fearing it, you begin to listen to what it is trying to show you. Faith grows strongest, not when life is easy, but when you choose to trust even when life is unclear. It is in those moments that you discover the depth of your resilience, the quiet power of your spirit, and the presence of something greater walking beside you. So, when you find yourself in a season of waiting, beside you, walking beside you, when answers feel distant and progress feels slow, remember this gentle truth. You are not stuck. You are being prepared. You are not abandoned. You are being guided. And you are not forgotten. You are being shaped into someone capable of receiving the blessings that are already on their way to you. Hold on to patience. Hold on to faith. And keep trusting that even in the unseen moments, the universe is still working, and God's plan for your life is unfolding with perfect timing. And as this understanding begins to settle deeper within you, another quiet realization slowly emerges, one that changes the way you see not only your struggles, but yourself. You begin to notice that trusting the universe is not only about believing that life will work out, it is about discovering that you were never separate from the flow of life in the first place. So often, we move through the world feeling isolated, as though we are small individuals fighting against a vast and unpredictable reality. We feel as though we must force our way forward, prove our worth, and constantly struggle to secure our place in a universe that seems indifferent. But when you pause, when you truly listen beneath the noise of fear, a different truth begins to reveal itself. You are not an outsider to existence. You are part of it. You are not merely walking through life. Life is also moving through you. Every breath you take is shared with the air around you. Every heartbeat echoes the rhythm of a universe that has been expanding for billions of years. Every emotion you feel connects you to the same hopes, fears, and longings that live within every human soul. And when you begin to see yourself in this way, not as a separate being, but as a living expression of something infinitely larger, trust starts to feel less like a difficult task and more like a natural state of being. Think of a leaf on a tree. The leaf does not spend its days worrying about whether the tree will continue to support it. It does not fear that the roots will suddenly stop drawing nourishment from the soil. It does not question whether the sun will rise tomorrow. It simply exists, fully connected to the life that sustains it. In many ways, you are like that leaf, deeply connected to a source of life that you cannot always see, but which has always been sustaining you. The same intelligence that orchestrates the movement of galaxies, the changing of seasons, and the beating of your heart. I seen the stavens, and the beating of your heart is present in every moment of your journey, yet the mind often forgets this connection. It creates the illusion of separation. It tells you that you are alone, that you must handle everything by yourself, that the future depends entirely on your ability to control it. And this illusion creates fear, because if you believe you are alone in a vast and uncertain universe, every challenge feels overwhelming. Every mistake feels catastrophic. Every delay feels like a threat to your survival. But the moment you begin to trust, truly trust, something shifts. You realize that you are supported by forces far greater than your own effort. You begin to feel a quiet sense of belonging, a deep inner calm that does not depend on circumstances. There is a story about a person who spent years chasing security. They worked tirelessly to build a life where nothing could go wrong. They planned every detail, saved every resource, avoided every risk, and yet, despite all their efforts, they lived with constant anxiety, because no matter how much control they tried to create, life continued to surprise them. One day, after facing an unexpected loss that shattered their carefully constructed plans, they reached a breaking point. How? Stead and overwhelmed. They stopped trying to fix everything for the first time in their life. They sat quietly, allowing themselves to feel the uncertainty instead of fighting it, and in that stillness, something unexpected happened. Instead of feeling weaker, they felt lighter. Instead of feeling more afraid, they felt strangely peaceful. It was as though they had been carrying a heavy weight for years without realizing it, and had finally set it down. They began to understand that true security does not come from controlling life. It comes from trusting it, not blindly, not passively, but with a deep inner knowing that even when circumstances change, the support of the universe remains constant. This is the essence of faith. It is not the belief that nothing will ever go wrong. It is the belief that even when things do go wrong, you will not be destroyed by them. That there is a wisdom guiding your path, a strength within you, and a presence beyond you that will carry you through every challenge. You may see this truth reflected in your own life. Think of the hardships you once believed you could never survive, the moments when you felt completely broken, when you thought you would never recover. And yet, here you are, still breathing, still moving forward, still capable of hope. Something carried you through those dark times. Something sustained you when your own strength felt insufficient. Whether you call it divine grace, the power of faith, or the quiet resilience of your soul, it was there. And it is still there now. Trusting the universe means remembering this, especially when fear tries to make you forget. It means recognizing that you have already been guided through countless challenges, and that the same guidance continues to exist in your life today. And when you begin to live with this awareness, something beautiful unfolds within you. You stop measuring your worth by external outcomes. You stop believing that success alone defines your value. Defines your value. You begin to understand that your true purpose is not simply to achieve, but to grow, to love, to awaken, and to become more fully yourself. Because the universe is not only guiding events in your life, it is shaping your soul. Every experience you face is an invitation to deepen your compassion, to strengthen your patience, to expand your understanding of what it means to live with faith. Even the people who hurt you, even the situations that challenged you, even the moments that forced you to question everything, have played a role in your awakening. They have taught you lessons that comfort could never teach. They have shown you strengths you never knew you possessed. And when you begin to see life in this way, as a continuous unfolding of growth, rather than a series of random events, trust becomes easier. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is this teaching me? This shift changes everything, because it transforms pain into purpose, uncertainty into opportunity, and fear into a doorway toward deeper faith. So when life feels uncertain again, when you find yourself standing at another crossroads, remember this gentle truth. You are not separate from the universe. You are part of its unfolding story. The same intelligence that moves the stars is present within your own heart, guiding you, shaping you, and leading you toward a future that is far greater than your current understanding. And even when you cannot see the full path ahead, even when doubt whispers in the quiet moments, hold on to this peaceful reminder. You are supported, you are connected, and you are being guided, and you are being guided every step of the way by a wisdom that never loses sight of your soul's highest good. So breathe, be patient, and trust that the journey you are on is not random, it is sacred, and it is leading you exactly where you are meant to be. And slowly, as this trust deepens within you, you begin to notice one of the most profound transformations a human heart can experience. The constant urge to rush, to force, to demand immediate answers begins to fade. In its place, a quiet patience starts to grow, like a calm sunrise spreading warmth across a once restless sky. You realize that life has never truly been against you. It has never been punishing you or withholding your blessings. Instead, it has been teaching you the sacred art of timing, the understanding that everything meaningful unfolds in its own season. Think of how nature moves. The sun does not rise earlier because we are impatient. The seasons do not change because we demand them to. A flower does not bloom because someone commands it to open. The apum. Each process follows a rhythm far wiser than human urgency. And yet, as human beings, we often live in a state of constant hurry. We want answers immediately. We want healing instantly. We want success without delay. We measure our lives against invisible clocks, comparing our progress with others, worrying that we are falling behind. But the universe does not operate according to human timelines. It moves according to divine timing, a timing that sees not only what you want in the present, but what your soul truly needs for the future. There was once a person who felt they were always late in life. They watched others around them achieving milestones, building careers, finding love, reaching dreams, while they struggled to find their own path. They carried a silent pain inside, a belief that somehow they had missed their moment. Years passed, filled with uncertainty and self-doubt. But during those years, they unknowingly developed qualities that would later change their life completely. They learned patience readily. Now, empathy and a deep understanding of suffering that allowed them to connect with others in a powerful way. And then, one day, an opportunity appeared, one that aligned perfectly with the person they had become through all those difficult years. They realized that if success had come earlier, they would not have been ready to hold it. Their struggles were not delays. They were preparation. This is the hidden beauty of divine timing. What feels like waiting is often shaping. What feels like stillness is often growth. And what feels like silence is often the universe working behind the scenes in ways you cannot yet see. Trusting the universe means accepting that your journey does not need to look like anyone else's. It means releasing the belief that you are late or behind or missing out. Because the truth is, what is meant for you cannot be taken by another. What is destined for your soul cannot arrive at the wrong time. And when this understanding settles within you, comparison begins to lose its power. You stop measuring your worth against other people's timelines. You stop questioning your progress. Instead, you begin to honor your own path, with all its twists, delays, and unexpected turns. You start to see that every step you have taken, even the painful ones, has brought you exactly where you are meant to be right now. Every heartbreak, every failure, every moment of confusion has contributed to your awakening. Even the mistakes you regret were not wasted. They taught you humility, self-awareness, and the courage to grow. They showed you the difference between what truly nourishes your soul and what only appears valuable on the surface. And, perhaps most importantly, they taught you that you are stronger than you once believed, that you can survive uncertainty, that you can heal after loss, that you can stand again after falling. This realization brings a deep peace, because once you understand your own resilience, fear begins to lose its grip. You no longer see challenges as threats to your existence, but as chapters in your unfolding story. But trust becomes easier when you remember how many times life has already carried you through what once seemed impossible. You may recall nights when you lay awake, overwhelmed by worry, convinced that you would never find a solution. Yet somehow, the morning always came. Somehow, you found a way forward. Somehow, you continued. That somehow is not an accident. It is the quiet presence of guidance, the unseen support that has always existed in your life. Even when you could not recognize it, trusting the universe means acknowledging this presence, especially in moments when you feel most alone. It means remembering that even when life feels uncertain, you are never truly without support, and perhaps this is why surrender brings such profound relief. Because surrender is not about giving up hope. It is about releasing fear. It is about allowing yourself to rest in the understanding that you do not have to carry the entire weight of existence on your shoulders. You are allowed to breathe. You are allowed to pause. You are allowed to trust that the future is unfolding in ways you cannot fully comprehend yet. There is a deep spiritual wisdom that says, when you cannot see the next step, focus only on the one in front of you. Because life is not meant to be understood all at once. It is meant to be lived moment by moment, with faith guiding each step. And when you begin to live this way, something beautiful happens. The anxiety about the distant future starts to fade. You find yourself more present, more aware of the simple blessings that surround you every day. You begin to notice the quiet miracles you once overlooked. The warmth of a sunrise, the comfort of a kind word, the strength you feel after overcoming a challenge, you once feared. You realize that life is not only about reaching destinations. One, it is also about experiencing the journey itself. And when you trust the universe, you allow yourself to fully experience each moment without constantly worrying about what comes next. So if you find yourself standing in uncertainty today, if your path feels unclear, if you are waiting for answers that have not yet arrived, let your heart hold this gentle reminder. You are not being forgotten. You are not being left behind. You are not walking alone, prepared and carried by a wisdom far greater than your own. And even when you cannot see it, yet even when the road feels long, trust that every step you take is leading you closer to the peace, purpose, and blessings that are meant for your soul. So be patient with yourself. Be gentle with your journey, and keep trusting that the universe and the divine love behind it is unfolding your life with perfect timing. Then take a slow, quiet breath and allow everything you have heard to settle gently within your heart, like soft rain sinking into the soil after a long season of dryness. Because when you step back and look at your journey as a whole, you begin to see a pattern that was always there, even when you couldn't recognize it in the moment. You see how every closed door redirected you, how every delay prepared you, how every heartbreak deepened your capacity to love, and how every uncertain step quietly led you toward growth. You begin to understand that your life has never been a series of random events. It has been a sacred unfolding, a carefully woven story where even the painful chapters carried hidden meaning. The nights you cried alone, they were shaping your resilience. The moments you felt lost, they were guiding you toward self-discovery. As you felt abandoned, they were teaching you to find strength within. And the seasons of waiting, they were quietly aligning your life with a timing far wiser than your own. And perhaps now, you can see that trust was never about believing life would always be easy. It was about believing that no matter what happens, you will be held, guided, and carried through it. Because there is something profoundly comforting in this truth. You were never meant to control everything. You are never meant to carry the entire weight of your future on your shoulders. You were only meant to walk forward with faith, step by step, allowing life to unfold as it must. And when you truly accept this, something beautiful begins to happen within you. The tension you once held so tightly begins to dissolve. The constant worry about what if starts to lose its power. You begin to feel lighter, calmer, more present in each moment. You stop fighting against life and start flowing with it. You stop fearing uncertainty and start seeing it as a doorway. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And begin asking, what is this guiding me toward? Because deep down, your soul already knows something your mind often forgets, that you are not alone in this journey. There is a quiet intelligence moving through your life, a divine presence that has been guiding you since your very first breath. It was there when you overcame struggles you thought would break you. It was there when unexpected help appeared at the right moment. It was there when hope returned to your heart after despair. And it is still there now. even in moments when you feel uncertain, even when the future seems unclear, even when you cannot see the full path ahead. So today, you can release the heavy burden of trying to control everything. You can allow yourself to rest in the gentle certainty that what is meant for you is already finding its way toward you. Trust that the doors meant to open will open. Trust that the people meant to stay will stay. Trust that the opportunities meant to reach you cannot miss you. And trust that even the challenges you face now are shaping you for a purpose far greater than you can imagine. Let this understanding settle into your spirit like a calm, steady light. And now, in this quiet moment, you may close your eyes if you wish, and let this simple, heartfelt prayer rise from within. May your heart find peace in uncertainty. May your mind release the weight of fear. May your soul remember that it is always guided. And may you walk forward with the quiet confidence that every step you take is being held by divine love. May patience grow where worry once lived. May faith rise where doubt once whispered. And may you always trust, even in the waiting, even in the silence, that your life is unfolding exactly as it is meant to. Breathe deeply. Be gentle with yourself. And remember this peaceful truth. You are safe in the flow of life. You are supported by a wisdom beyond understanding. And you are always, always being guided home.
You see, the funny thing about human beings is that we are always looking for something that has never been lost. And we're so clever at it that we can spend an entire lifetime doing it, quite seriously, with great books and big temples and heavy questions like, what am I really supposed to do? We are, in a sense, professional seekers. And like any good profession, it has its tools: meditation, prayer, therapy, business plans, protein shakes. Each one promises to finally get you there. But no one ever really tells you where there is. And perhaps that's the first clue, because what if you're already there and your search is simply disguising the fact that you don't want to be? Now, this is rather awkward, isn't it? Because if that's true, then the whole structure of modern ambition collapses. The idea that you can finally fix yourself, finally earn peace, finally reach some kind of enlightened state, it all begins to look like a dog chasing its own tail, round and round. And if you're fast enough, you might even think you're getting somewhere. But the moment you stop, you see the whole game. You were the one spinning all along. And you see, this is the sort of divine joke the universe likes to play. It gives you the taste for the search. It gives you the books and the teachers and the podcasts, and it lets you run until you collapse in exhaustion. Because only when you are tired enough of looking does the real seeing begin. There's an old Zen story, you know, about a student who went to his master and said, "Master, I am tired of seeking. What shall I do?" And the master said, "Good. Then stop seeking." And the student, frustrated, said, "But if I stop seeking, how will I find it?" And the master smiled. "Ah, you see, the seeker is the problem. That's the heart of it. You see, the universe isn't hiding from you. It has never once gone into hiding. It's been dancing in front of you all this time, in your breath, in the wind that moves through your hair, in the absurdity of trying to explain what you already are. But you were so busy looking out there that you forgot to feel here. And it's not your fault. You were raised in a culture that worships the pursuit. You were told to chase grades, careers, happiness, enlightenment, even authenticity. You were never told that the moment you try to possess these things, they vanish. Happiness isn't something you own, it's something you notice. Peace isn't a goal, it's an atmosphere that reveals itself when the noise stops. And enlightenment, well, that's the greatest punchline of all, because there's no one left to achieve it. You see, every great tradition, whether Eastern or Western, has in its own poetic way been whispering the same thing. Stop running. The thing you're looking for isn't hiding behind the next corner of the mind. It's right here, breathing with you, looking through your eyes, pretending to be the one who's searching. And if you really listen, I mean really listen, you'll feel a strange silence begin to open beneath all your questions. It's not an answer, it's not even a thought. It's more like space, the kind of stillness that has always been there, quietly supporting the noise. Most people are afraid of that silence. They'll do anything to fill it music, scrolling, arguing, manifesting, improving. Because silence reveals something uncomfortable, that the one who's trying to be fixed was never broken in the first place. So here you are, after years of self-help, still sitting on the same chair, in the same skin, thinking that you should be different. And that thought itself keeps the wheel spinning. Because the moment you think you should be something other than what you are, you've already rejected life as it is. And life, being infinitely polite, will keep offering you new forms of dissatisfaction, just so you can continue your noble quest to fix what was never wrong. It's a rather generous universe in that sense. But it's also mischievous. It lets you build your little altars to progress and discipline, and then, just when you think you've mastered the game, it knocks them over. Not out of cruelty, but to remind you that you can't hold what is already you. The same way you cannot bite your own teeth or see your own eyes directly, you cannot find the self because you are it. The one looking is the one being looked for. The whole search collapses when you see that the seeker and the sought were never separate. And so, at the end of all your efforts, after all your striving, something rather beautiful happens. You give up, not in defeat, but in relief. You realize you've been standing in your own way this entire time. And when that realization dawns, not as an idea, but as a felt sense, the whole machinery of striving falls silent. And in that silence, there it is, the thing you've been running after through lifetimes of desire, discipline, guilt, and effort. Peace, not earned, not achieved, simply revealed. You see, the secret was never hidden, it was only ignored. But don't take my word for it. Try doing nothing, truly nothing, for just a moment. Don't try to meditate, don't try to breathe properly, don't even try to be present. And suddenly, there you are, the one who was never lost. Once you have seen that the seeker was never separate from what was sought, there comes this strange question, what now? Because life, you see, doesn't stop just because you've had a moment of realization. You still get hungry, you still have to pay bills, you still forget where you left your keys. And this is where most people trip again. They think awakening means rising above life. No, no, no. No, it means sinking back into it. It's like realizing the ocean you were swimming in was water all along, and suddenly you relax and float. Now, that doesn't mean you never sink again. Sometimes you still struggle, still grasp, still worry, but you know something you didn't before. You know it's all part of the same ocean. And so life becomes, in a curious way, lighter. Not easier, necessarily, but lighter. You stop dragging yourself around like a problem to be solved. You begin to laugh at the whole cosmic hide-and-seek game that consciousness seems to be playing with itself. You see, existence hides from itself in the form of you. It forgets it's infinite, and then spends years trying to remember. And when it finally does, it says, "Ah, that was quite the game." And then, just as easily, it forgets again. That's why the wisest people in history always had a sense of humor. They laughed, not because they didn't care, but because they finally saw the absurdity of caring too much. They realized that seriousness is a form of fear, the refusal to let life flow as it is. When you stop taking yourself so seriously, something beautiful happens. Compassion begins to arise naturally. Because you no longer divide the world into you and them, you look at another person, even the difficult ones, and you recognize the same cosmic mischief behind their eyes, the same confusion, the same longing, the same search for something that was never gone, and you can't help but forgive them. Because how can you stay angry at a dream character once you know you're dreaming? Now, this doesn't mean you suddenly become passive or lose your individuality. It means you start to live as life itself, not as an actor trying to control the plot. You begin to see that every movement, every breath, every impulse, even the ones you used to call mistakes, are all part of one continuous motion of being. It's like watching fire. No flame is separate, yet each dances in its own way. And if you watch carefully enough, you begin to see that all of existence is dancing with itself, as itself. The tree is dancing as a tree. The bird is dancing as flight. And you, my friend, are dancing as you. That's the real freedom, not to escape the dance, but to join it fully. Because you see, every attempt to control life was a misunderstanding of what control actually is. Real control is not domination, it's participation. When a musician plays perfectly, he's not controlling the instrument, he's merged with it. In the same way, when you stop trying to fix your life, life begins to play through you like music. You still make choices, yes, but they no longer come from fear. They arise naturally, like waves forming on the sea. And the sea doesn't need to plan its waves. So, how do you live once you've seen that you were never lost? You live like a person who's finally come home. You stop performing for a God you thought was watching you, and instead realize you are that very watching. You begin to enjoy simple things again, not because they bring you closer to enlightenment, but because they are enlightenment in disguise. The sunlight on the floor, the laughter of a child, the way a stranger smiles for no reason at all of it is sacred because all of it is you. Now, some people worry, if I stop striving, won't I become lazy? Won't life fall apart? No, because you never really controlled it in the first place. The planet spins quite beautifully without your supervision. Your heart beats all on its own, and your lungs keep rhythm with the wind. You were never the conductor of this orchestra. You were always part of the symphony. And when you realize that, you stop trying to outsmart the music. You simply listen. There's a subtle intelligence, you see, that moves everything. And when you stop resisting it, it moves through you effortlessly. You begin to trust again, not in belief, not in dogma, but in direct experience. You feel the universe breathing you, feeding you, thinking you, and then one day you laugh because you finally understand the punchline. There was never a you to be saved. There was only life, pretending to be a person who needed saving. And the great irony is that the moment you stop trying to be spiritual, you become naturally spiritual. The moment you stop trying to be perfect, you begin to live perfectly. Not because you followed some map to heaven, but because you realized you were standing in heaven all along. So, when the mind starts whispering again, maybe I've lost it, maybe I need to get back, just smile. You can't lose what you are. The sky doesn't need to remember it's blue. All that really changes is the seeing, the recognition that life was never a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be experienced. You are not here to reach something, you are here to express something. And that expression is happening right now, as this breath, as this moment, as this incredible play of form and silence. And when the curtain finally falls, as it does for everyone, you won't be afraid, because you'll know it was only a performance, and you were both the actor and the audience, clapping for yourself all along. So when you've tried everything, every book, every technique, every dream of becoming something greater, nothing seems to work, maybe that's not failure. Maybe that's grace. Because the end of seeking is the beginning of seeing. And when you finally stop trying to find the secret, it smiles at you quietly and says, "The secret was never hidden."
Why is it that so many people who are spiritually sensitive, who seem to have this inner knowing, this capacity for awareness, were born into families that were, shall we say, less than ideal, families that were dysfunctional, toxic, painful? And you might think, well, if the universe is so wise, if there's some kind of intelligence behind all this, why would it put these sensitive souls into such difficult circumstances? But what if I told you that this is not a mistake? What if the very thing you've been cursing, the very situation you've been trying to run from your entire life, is actually the most important, not because suffering is noble, but because sometimes the hardest soil produces the strongest trees? See, we have this notion that spiritual awakening should come through pleasant experiences, through meditation retreats, through reading wise books, through sitting quietly in beautiful gardens. And yes, these things can help. But the real awakening, the kind that shakes you to your bones, often comes through fire. It comes through difficulty. It comes through having everything you thought you needed stripped away until all that remains is what you truly are. Think about it this way. If you were born into a perfectly harmonious family, where everyone was kind and understanding, where love flowed freely and naturally, would you ever question anything? Would you ever look deeper? Would you ever have to develop that inner strength, that capacity to see through illusion? Probably not. You'd simply flow along with the current, never knowing there was anything else. But a toxic family, a dysfunctional family, they give you something else entirely. They give you friction. They give you problems that cannot be solved by ordinary means. They give you situations where you cannot simply go along with what everyone else is doing, because what everyone else is doing is clearly mad. And in that friction, in that impossibility, something begins to wake up. Let me put it to you another way. When a grain of sand gets into an oyster, it irritates, it hurts. The oyster cannot simply eject it. So what does the oyster do? It begins to coat the grain of sand with layers of nacre, slowly, patiently, and eventually that irritating grain becomes a pearl. The most beautiful thing the oyster creates comes from the thing that hurt it most. Your toxic family was the grain of sand. And you, through all your struggles, through all your pain, through all those years of trying to understand why they were the way they were, you've been creating. You've been developing something that people born into easy circumstances never have to develop. Wisdom. Real wisdom. Not the kind you read in books, but the kind that comes from having to figure out how to survive when everything around you is chaos. But here's where it gets really interesting. A toxic family doesn't just create problems. It creates a very specific kind of problem. It creates confusion about love. And this, strange as it sounds, is the gateway to awakening. You see, most people never question what love is. They simply accept whatever their family taught them. If their family was loving, they assume that's what love looks like. If their family was distant, they assume love is supposed to be distant. They never have to think about it. They never have to examine it. They simply repeat the pattern. But when you're born into a toxic family, you cannot do this. The pattern is so obviously broken that you cannot simply repeat it. You might try it first. Many do, but eventually something in you rebels. Something in you says, no, this isn't right. This isn't what love is supposed to be. And in that moment of rebellion, in that refusal to accept the pattern, you've taken the first step toward awakening, because now you must figure out for yourself what love actually is. You cannot rely on what you were taught. You cannot trust the programming. You have to go deeper. You have to look within. You have to discover what love means when it's not mixed up with manipulation, with control, with conditions, with all the garbage your family attached to it. Not to suffer, though there was suffering. Not to be damaged, though there was damage. But to be forced to wake up, to be forced to question, to be forced to look deeper than most people ever have to look. Now, I want to be clear about something. This doesn't mean the pain wasn't real. It doesn't mean what happened to you was okay. It doesn't mean you should feel grateful for abuse or neglect or whatever it was your family did. That would be missing the point entirely. The pain was real. The damage was real. What happened to you was not right. But here's the thing about reality. It doesn't care about our ideas of right and wrong. A tree doesn't grow straight by being kept in a greenhouse. It grows straight by being bent by the wind, by having to reach for the light, by having to develop deep roots to keep from being blown over. The wind is not kind. The wind is just wind. But without the wind, the tree would never develop strength. Your family was the wind. And you, whether you know it or not, have been developing roots that go very deep. Roots that most people never have to grow. And those roots, that depth, that's what makes you capable of understanding things that others cannot understand. Think about the people you know who had easy childhoods. Pleasant, comfortable, everything handed to them. What are they like now? I'm not saying they're bad people. But often, they have a certain shallowness to them, don't they? A certain inability to grasp the darker, deeper aspects of life. They live on the surface because they've never had to go beneath it. They believe in fairy tales because their life has been something of a fairy tale. But you cannot believe in fairy tales. You've seen behind the curtain. You know that families can be cruel, that parents can be selfish, that love can be twisted into something ugly. And while this knowledge was painful to acquire, it has made you real in a way that protected people never become. You've been stripped of illusions. And while most people spend their entire lives clinging to illusions, you don't have that luxury. You had to see things as they actually are. And seeing things as they actually are, that's the beginning of wisdom. That's the beginning of spiritual awakening. Now let's talk about something else. Something that might make you uncomfortable. Because here's a truth that's hard to accept. Your family wasn't just toxic to you. They were toxic because they were wounded. They were wounded because their parents were wounded. And their parents were wounded because their parents were wounded. It goes back and back and back, generation after generation, each one passing on the pain they received because they didn't know how to do anything else. You are the culmination of all that pain. All those generations of wounds, they all flowed into you. And you were the one who finally said, this stops here. You were the one who finally looked at the pattern and said, no more. I will not pass this on. I will not continue this cycle. And that is why you're different. That is why you were chosen, if you want to use that word. Not because you're special in some ego sense, but because your soul was strong enough to say, I will carry this weight. I will be the one who breaks the chain. Think about what that means. Your family, as toxic as they were not your enemies. They were your teachers. Terrible teachers, yes. Teachers who taught through pain rather than love. But teachers nonetheless. They showed you exactly what not to do. They showed you exactly what happens when people don't wake up, when they don't question, when they simply repeat the patterns they inherited. And by showing you what not to do, they forced you to figure out what to do. They forced you to become conscious. They forced you to choose. Because you see, that's the real gift. Choice. Most people never have to choose how to be. They simply are what their family made them. They're automatons, robots, running on programming they never questioned. But you had to choose. You had to consciously decide what kind of person you wanted to be. You had to consciously decide what you believed love was. You had to consciously decide what values you would hold, what kind of relationships you would have, what kind of life you would build. Nothing was automatic, nothing was given. Everything had to be chosen. And in that choosing, in that constant, difficult work of choosing, you became awake. You became conscious. You became, in the truest sense, yourself. Not what your family wanted you to be, not what society expected you to be, but what you, in your deepest knowing, chose to be. Now here's where people often get confused. They think awakening means being happy all the time, being peaceful all the time, being detached from everything. But that's not awakening. That's just another kind of sleep, another kind of escape. Real awakening means seeing clearly. It means understanding the patterns. It means recognizing that your family's behavior was not about you. It was never about you. It was about them, their wounds, their pain, their inability to love, because they had never been loved properly themselves. And when you see this, really see it, something extraordinary is happening. The anger begins to dissolve. Not because you force it to, not because you think you should forgive, but because you finally understand. You understand that they were not villains. They were wounded people acting out their wounds, unable to do anything else because no one ever showed them another way. Does this mean you have to have a relationship with them? No. Does this mean you have to trust them? Absolutely not. Does this mean you have to subject yourself to their toxicity? Not at all. Understanding is not the same as allowing abuse. Compassion is not the same as being a doormat. You can understand someone completely and still choose to stay away from them. You can have compassion for their wounds and still protect yourself from their behavior. These are not contradictions. These are simply different levels of understanding. The truly awakened person knows this. They know that protecting yourself is not the same as hating. They know that setting boundaries is not the same as being cruel. They know that you can wish someone well while also wishing them well from a great distance. And this is the freedom that comes from having been born into a toxic family. You learn to love without attachment. You learn to care without being consumed. You learn to see people clearly without judgment. Because you've had to do all these things with your own family. People from healthy families, they often struggle with this. They feel guilty for setting boundaries. They feel selfish for prioritizing their own needs. They confuse love with sacrifice, with enduring pain, with putting up with behavior that damages them. Because that's what they were taught. But you learned a different lesson. You learned that real love includes boundaries. That real love sometimes means saying no. That real love sometimes means walking away. Not with anger, not with hatred, but simply with the clear understanding that this situation is not good for you, and you have every right to choose situations that are. This is spiritual maturity. This is what most people spend lifetimes trying to learn. And you learned it early because you had no choice. Your family gave you an advanced course in what love is not. And in learning that, you also learned what love is. Let me share something with you. The most spiritually awake people I've ever known, they all had difficult childhoods. All of them. And for years I wondered why. Why does suffering seem to be the common denominator in awakening? And then I realized it's not about the suffering. It's about the questioning that suffering produces. When life is easy, you don't question. You don't have to. But when life is hard, when it doesn't make sense, when the people who are supposed to love you hurt you instead, you start asking the big questions. Why am I here? What is this all about? What is real and what is illusion? These questions, these are the questions that lead to awakening. Your toxic family pushed you to ask these questions early. They pushed you to look for meaning in a situation that seemed meaningless. They pushed you to find love in yourself because you couldn't find it in them. They pushed you to develop an inner life because the outer life was too painful. And in developing that inner life, in turning inward because the outer world was so harsh, you found something most people never find. You found your true self, not the self your family wanted you to be, not the self society expected you to be, but the self you actually are, beneath all the conditioning, beneath all the wounds, beneath all the stories. This self, this true self, it was always there. But most people never discover it because they never have to look for it. They're too busy living on the surface, too busy being who everyone expects them to be. But you had to dig deep because the surface was unbearable. And in digging deep, you struck gold. Now here's the final piece of this understanding. Your awakening is not just for you. It's for everyone. It's for your family, even though they may never acknowledge it. It's for the generations that came before you, because in healing yourself, you heal the ancestral line. And it's for the generations that will come after you, because you've broken the pattern, you've stopped the cycle. You've said, this madness ends with me. This is what it means to be spiritually awake. It's not about being better than others. It's not about being special. It's about being awake enough to see the patterns, strong enough to break them, and brave enough to choose differently even when it's difficult. Your toxic family was the darkness that forced you to find your own light. They were the problem that forced you to become the solution. They were the question that forced you to find the answer. And the answer you found, the light you discovered, it's not just for you. So yes, being born into a toxic family is a gift. Not because the toxicity was good, but because it forced you to become who you really are. It forced you to wake up when you might have slept through your entire life. It forced you to question when you might have simply accepted. It forced you to choose when you might have simply followed. And now, having done all that work, having climbed that mountain, having discovered that light within yourself, you stand as proof that transformation is possible, that breaking cycles is possible, that awakening is possible. Not despite the difficulties, but because of them. This is the great gift. This is why you were placed exactly where you were placed. Not to suffer, but to awaken. Not to be broken. You know, there's a particular kind of person who walks through this world feeling absolutely everything. Not just their own sorrows and joys, but everyone else's too. They're like human tuning forks, vibrating to every emotional frequency within range. We might call them sensitive souls, empaths, or simply those who feel too much. And society has trained these people rather well, hasn't it? Trained them to believe that their gift of sensitivity comes with an unspoken price. The price of being everyone's emotional sanctuary, everyone's confessor, everyone's unpaid therapist. But something rather extraordinary happens when one of these sensitive souls finally stops. Just stops. Stops absorbing everyone's moods like a sponge. Stops saying yes when every fiber of their being screams no. Stops twisting themselves into impossible shapes just to make others comfortable. What happens then is not what you'd expect. They don't become cold. They don't become cruel. They become something far more dangerous to a world built on their endless self-sacrifice. They become awake. Now, let me tell you what's really going on here, because most people completely misunderstand the nature of sensitivity. We think of the sensitive person as someone who's naturally soft, naturally giving, naturally meant to take care of others. But this is where we've gotten it all wrong. That sensitivity, that ability to feel everything, it didn't develop because these souls are meant to be the world's emotional janitors. It developed as a survival mechanism. You see, if you grew up in an environment where you had to read the room constantly, where you had to anticipate someone's mood before they walked through the door, where your safety depended on managing other people's emotions, you learned to feel everything. Not as a gift, but as armor. The sensitive child who could sense danger in a parent's tone of voice, who could feel the shift in household energy before the storm hit. That child survived by becoming exquisitely attuned to everyone else. That here's the trick. They became so good at reading others that they never learned to read themselves. And so we have these sensitive souls walking around, 30, 40, 50 years old, still operating from that childhood program, still believing that their value lies in their usefulness, still convinced that if they just give enough, care enough, sacrifice enough, they'll finally earn the love they've been seeking all along. What a magnificent con job we've pulled on these people. We've convinced them that their sensitivity is a gift they must share with everyone, all the time, regardless of the cost to themselves. We've told them that boundaries are selfish, that saying no is unkind, that taking care of themselves is somehow a betrayal of their nature. But watch what happens when one of these sensitive souls finally hits their limit. And they all do, eventually. There comes a moment, perhaps after years of giving, until they're hollow, perhaps after one more person takes advantage of their kindness, perhaps on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon when they're sitting alone and realize they can't remember the last time anyone asked how they're really doing. In that moment, something cracks open. Not in a dramatic way, necessarily. Sometimes it's just a quiet thought, a simple question that changes everything. What if I stopped? What if I stopped trying to fix everyone? What if I stopped absorbing everyone's pain? What if I stopped being available for every crisis, real or manufactured? And in that question, there's a kind of terror, isn't there? Because the sensitive soul has built their entire identity around being needed. They don't know who they are without someone to rescue, someone to comfort, someone to save. Their whole life has been organized around this role. And the thought of stepping out of it feels like stepping into an abyss. But here's what actually happens when they dare to step into that abyss. They discover it's not an abyss at all. It's space. Open, vast, liberating space. Space to breathe. Space to think their own thoughts. Space to feel their own feelings without everyone else's emotions crowding in. And in that space, they begin to see things they couldn't see before. They see the patterns. Oh, the patterns become so clear once you stop participating in them. They see how certain people only call when they need something. They notice who disappears when they stop being the one who reaches out first. They recognize the emotional vampires, those charming people who always have a crisis, always need support, always take and never quite get around to giving back. Now this is where it gets interesting, because the sensitive soul doesn't become cynical when they see these patterns. That's what people fear, isn't it? They fear that if they stop being so giving, so open, so endlessly compassionate, they'll turn into some hardened, bitter version of themselves. But that's not what happens. What happens is they become discerning. They develop what you might call conscious sensitivity. They can still feel deeply, still connect profoundly, still offer genuine compassion, but now they choose. They choose where to direct their energy instead of scattering it to everyone who demands it. Think about a spotlight. A sensitive soul who hasn't awakened yet is like a floodlight, illuminating everything and everyone around them while standing in their own shadow. But when they wake up, they become a spotlight, focused, intentional, powerful. They shine their light where it truly matters, where it's genuinely needed, where it will actually make a difference. And yes, this means some people get left in the dark. The people who were only there for the free illumination, who never intended to shine any light back, they suddenly find themselves without their personal sun. And they don't like it one bit. This is when you'll hear the accusations start. You've changed. You're not the person I knew. What happened to you? And the beautiful thing is, the awakened sensitive soul no longer scrambles to reassure these people. They don't rush to prove they're still good, still kind, still the same old reliable doormat. They simply smile and think, yes, I have changed. Finally. Because here's the truth that nobody talks about. The old version of the sensitive soul, the one who pleased everyone, the one who had no boundaries, the one who absorbed everyone's pain like it was their job, that version wasn't real. It was a performance, a survival strategy that got mistaken for personality. The real person was buried underneath all that compulsive caretaking. The real person had opinions they never voiced, had needs they never expressed, had anger they never released, had dreams they never pursued, because they were too busy managing everyone else's emotional weather. And when that real person finally starts to emerge, it's not comfortable. Not for the sensitive soul, and certainly not for all the people who benefited from their self-erasure. There's a period, and it can last months or even years, where everything feels strange and new and slightly terrifying. The sensitive soul has to learn skills they never developed. How to say no without a 3-paragraph explanation. How to disappoint someone without imploding from guilt. How to recognize when someone is trying to manipulate them back into the old patterns. Let me tell you about guilt, because guilt is the primary weapon used against awakening sensitive souls. The moment they start setting boundaries, the guilt arrives like clockwork. Who do you think you are, putting yourself first? Don't you care about anyone but yourself? I thought you were a good person. And the sensitive soul, who spent their entire life proving they're good enough, feels that guilt like a knife. But here's where the real work happens. They have to sit with that guilt. They have to feel it without immediately trying to make it go away by reverting to their old patterns. They have to ask themselves the crucial question: is this guilt telling me I've actually done something wrong, or is it just the discomfort of claiming my own life? Most of the time, it's the latter. The guilt is just the death throes of the old identity. It's the part of them that learned to survive by being useful, by being needed, by being the one who fixes everything. And that part is terrified of becoming obsolete. But it must become obsolete. Because, you see, the sensitive soul cannot become who they truly are while carrying everyone else's emotional baggage. They cannot discover their authentic self while wearing the mask of the perpetual pleaser. They cannot hear their own inner voice while amplifying everyone else's needs. And so begins what I call the great sorting. Relationships that were built on the sensitive soul's endless giving start to crack. Some will evolve. The people who genuinely care, who actually see the sensitive soul as a whole person rather than a resource to be extracted, these people will adjust. They'll respect the boundaries. They'll celebrate the changes. They might even feel inspired to look at their own patterns, but others will resist. They'll push back and get simply. He used to be speaking in possibly house. They'll try guilt, anger, manipulation, whatever it takes to get their emotional support system back online. And this is where the sensitive soul faces their biggest test. Can they hold their ground, even when people they care about are upset with them? Can they disappoint others to stay true to themselves? This is not an easy thing. The sensitive soul has been trained since childhood to believe that other people's comfort is more important than their own authenticity. They've learned that making waves is dangerous, that standing up for themselves is selfish, that their needs don't matter as much as everyone else's. Breaking this conditioning requires something like courage. Not the dramatic kind of courage, but the quiet, everyday courage of choosing yourself when every cell in your body has been programmed to choose others. Watch what happens to the body when a sensitive soul stops people-pleasing. This is fascinating. For years, maybe decades, their body has been in a constant state of stress. Their nervous system has been processing not just their own emotions, but everyone else's too. They've had headaches, stomach problems, exhaustion that sleep doesn't cure. Their body has been screaming at them to stop, but they kept pushing through because everyone needed them. But when they finally stop, when they finally start saying no, when they finally create boundaries that protect their energy, the body begins to relax. The chronic tension starts to release. The mysterious aches and pains begin to fade. Sleep becomes deeper, energy returns. It's as if the body finally exhales after holding its breath for years. And this makes sense, doesn't it? The body was never meant to process everyone else's emotional waste. The sensitive soul has been functioning like an emotional sewage treatment plant, and their body paid the price. When they stop taking on everyone else's stress, anxiety, and pain, their physical health naturally begins to restore. Now here's something crucial to understand. When a sensitive soul awakens and starts seeing the truth, they don't lose their sensitivity. This is what people fear, and it's simply not true. They don't become numb or disconnected or cold. What happens is their sensitivity becomes conscious rather than compulsive. Before awakening, they absorbed everything automatically. like a sponge in water. They had no control over it. Someone was sad, they felt sad. Someone was anxious, they felt anxious. Someone was angry, they felt responsible for fixing it. But after awakening, something shifts. They can still sense all those emotions. Their radar is just as accurate, maybe even more so. But now there's a pause between sensing and absorbing. A moment where they can ask, is this mine or theirs? Do I want to take this on or let it pass through? They develop what you might call a selective membrane, permeable enough to remain connected, but strong enough to remain themselves. This conscious sensitivity becomes their superpower. They can walk into a room and instantly read the energy, but they're no longer knocked over by it. They can listen to someone's problems with genuine compassion, but they don't leave the conversation carrying those problems. They can love people deeply without losing themselves in the process. This is the gift that was always meant to emerge from their sensitivity. Not endless self-sacrifice, but conscious connection. Not absorption, but genuine empathy. Not drowning in everyone else's emotions, but swimming skillfully through the emotional waters of life. Let me tell you what happens in relationships when a sensitive soul awakens. It's rather remarkable. The people who are using them start to fall away naturally. There's no big confrontation, usually. Just a gradual fading as the sensitive soul stops being available for the old dynamics. The friend who only called during crises stops calling when the sensitive soul stops rushing to rescue them. The family member who demanded constant emotional support finds another target when boundaries appear. The partner who relied on the sensitive soul to manage all the emotional labor either learns to carry their own weight or looks for someone else to carry it for them. This falling away can feel like loss, and in a way it is. But it's the loss of relationships that were never really relationships at all. They were arrangements, contracts where the sensitive soul provided unlimited emotional resources in exchange for the crumbs of connection. When those contracts end, space opens up, and into that space come different kinds of people. People who see the sensitive soul as a whole person, not a resource. People who give as much as they take. People who respect boundaries instead of testing them. People who love the real person, not the performing persona. These new relationships feel different. They feel lighter somehow, even though they're deeper. There's less drama, less crisis, less exhausting emotional management. There's more ease, more reciprocity, more genuine joy. The sensitive soul discovers something astonishing. Real connection is actually restful, not draining. Love that's genuine doesn't require you to abandon yourself. True friendship means both people take care of each other, not one person doing all the caretaking. Now I want to talk about anger, because this is where things get really interesting. The awakening sensitive soul often discovers a tremendous amount of anger buried under all that compulsive niceness. Anger at being used, anger at being taken for granted, anger at all the times they said yes when they meant no, anger at the people who exploited their kindness, anger at themselves for allowing it. This anger can be shocking. The sensitive soul has spent their whole life being nice, being understanding, being patient. They've suppressed their anger so thoroughly that they forgot it was there. But it was there all along, festering under the surface, leaking out as resentment, bitterness, chronic stress. And when this anger finally surfaces, the sensitive soul often panics. They think, oh no, I'm becoming the kind of person I never wanted to be. I'm becoming angry and bitter and hard. But this is a misunderstanding. The anger isn't making them into someone new. It's revealing someone who was always there, but never had permission to exist. And this anger, when it's acknowledged and expressed appropriately, is actually healthy. It's the part of them that knows their worth. The part that refuses to be used. The part that says, no, enough, I matter too. The anger is not their enemy, it's their teacher. It shows them exactly where their boundaries were violated. It gives them the energy to establish new ones. It burns away the false self and reveals the real one underneath. But the sensitive soul has to learn to work with this anger skillfully. Not to explode at everyone who ever wronged them. Not to become bitter and suspicious of all human connection. But to use the anger as information, as fuel for change, as the fire that transforms them from pleaser to person. Here's something beautiful that happens. As the sensitive soul heals, as they learn to honor their own needs and set healthy boundaries, they often find themselves wanting to help others do the same. But the way they help is completely different now. Before they helped by doing everything for people, by absorbing their pain, by fixing their problems. They helped from a place of compulsion and codependency. Now they help by holding space. By believing in people's ability to solve their own problems. By sharing what they've learned. Without trying to save anyone. They become what you might call a conscious guide rather than a compulsive rescuer. And this actually helps people far more than the old way ever did. Because when you rescue people, you reinforce their helplessness. But when you believe in their capacity to figure things out, you help them find their own strength. The awakened sensitive soul understands that the greatest gift they can give others is not to do things for them, but to trust them to do things for themselves. Let me tell you about something I call the return to self. After the initial awakening, after the boundaries are set, after some relationships end and others transform, there's a period where the sensitive soul has to learn to be alone with themselves. Really alone. Not lonely, but in solitude. For the first time in their life. There's no one they're trying to please, no one whose emotions they're managing, no one they're performing for, just them. And this can be uncomfortable at first, because without all that external noise, they have to face their own thoughts, their own feelings, their own desires. They have to ask themselves questions they've been avoiding. What do I actually want? What do I actually think? Who am I when I'm not being useful to someone? These questions can feel terrifying because the sensitive soul has spent so long defining themselves through others that they don't quite know who they are on their own. But this is where the real treasure lies. In that solitude, in that space where they're not performing or pleasing or fixing, they begin to meet themselves for the first time. They discover their own preferences, their own opinions, their own quirks. They find out what makes them laugh when no one's watching, what moves them when there's no one to impress, what lights them up when there's no one to please. They discover that they're interesting, that they have depths they never had time to plunge, that they're actually quite good company. And something wonderful happens. The sensitive soul falls in love, not with someone else, but with themselves. Not in a narcissistic way, but in a gentle, appreciative way. They start to see themselves as worthy of the same care and attention they've always given others. They start treating themselves with the same compassion they've extended to everyone else. They start honoring their own needs with the same dedication they brought to everyone else's. This self-love is revolutionary. Because once you genuinely love yourself, you can no longer accept relationships that require you to abandon yourself. Once you know your own worth, you can no longer settle for breadcrumbs of affection. Once you've tasted the peace of being alone with yourself, you can no longer tolerate connections that create chaos. The sensitive soul who has awakened and returned to themselves becomes unshakable in a way they never were before. Not because they've hardened their heart, but because they finally found their center. And from that center, they engage with the world in a completely new way. They give from overflow rather than depletion. They help from inspiration rather than obligation. They love from wholeness rather than neediness. They connect from authenticity rather than performance. This is what I call sovereign sensitivity, the ability to feel everything while remaining yourself, the capacity to care deeply without losing yourself, the gift of being both open and boundaried, both soft and strong. And here's the beautiful paradox. When the sensitive soul stops trying to please everyone, when they stop absorbing everyone's emotions, when they finally put themselves first, they actually become more effective at helping others. Not less, more. Because they're no longer helping from woundedness. They're helping from wholeness. They're not rescuing people to feel valuable. They're supporting people because it genuinely moves them. They're not fixing problems to avoid their own. They're sharing wisdom they've earned through their own healing. The awakened sensitive soul becomes a kind of lighthouse. They stand on solid ground, shining their light steadily, illuminating the path for those who are ready to see. But they don't chase ships in the fog. They don't abandon their post to rescue every vessel in distress. They trust that their steady light is enough, that those who are meant to find their way will find it. This is true service, not self-sacrifice, but self-offering. Not depletion, but contribution. Not martyrdom, but mastery. So what happens when a sensitive soul stops pleasing everyone and starts seeing the truth? They don't become less. They become more. More authentically themselves. More genuinely connected. More powerfully present. More radiantly alive, the true self that was always there, buried under all that people-pleasing, finally emerges. And it turns out that true self is magnificent. Not because it's perfect, or enlightened, or beyond all human struggle, but because it's real, beautifully, messily, courageously real. And in a world full of masks and performances, that realness is the most precious thing of all.
Everyone, at some point, has felt the sting of being hurt. Someone you trusted betrayed you. Someone you loved abandoned you. Someone you depended on dismissed you as if you were nothing. And in those moments, the pain feels unbearable. It feels like your very being has been wounded, as though something precious inside you has been torn apart. We walk through life carrying these wounds like badges, telling ourselves, I will never let this happen again. And so, we build walls. We armor ourselves with indifference. We wear masks of confidence, pretending we cannot be touched. But have you noticed? The more armor you put on, the heavier it becomes. The more you try to protect yourself, the more fragile you actually feel. Because deep down you know the wall is not real protection. It is only a prison. Think about a piece of glass. If you want to keep it safe, you might wrap it in cloth, hide it away in a box, and lock the box in a room. But then what happens? The glass never sees the light. It never fulfills its purpose. And the moment it touches the world again, the smallest blow will shatter it. This is what happens to us when we live in armor. We cut ourselves off from life, thinking it will spare us from pain. But instead, it makes us brittle. Have you noticed that the strongest things in nature are not hard, but soft? A tree that does not bend with the wind is uprooted. A rock crumbles, but water flows on. The soft, the yielding, the flexible, these endure. So ask yourself, why do you want to be hard? Why do you want to be untouchable? Hardness looks like strength, but it is actually weakness in disguise. Here is the paradox. You are hurt not because of what happens to you, but because of the meaning you give it. If someone insults you, the words themselves are just sounds. But if you believe those words, if they strike against the image you carry of yourself, then you feel pain. If someone rejects you, what hurts is not their absence, but the story you tell yourself that you are unworthy, unlovable, less than whole. The event itself is neutral. It is the interpretation that cuts. This is difficult to see, because we are trained to live through images of ourselves. We think we are this fragile mask that must be defended at all costs. And when the mask is scratched, we cry out as though the face itself has been wounded. But who you really are cannot be scratched. When you look closely, you realize that the hurt is never in the insult, never in the betrayal, never in the rejection. The hurt is in the clutching, the holding on, the refusal to let the wave pass. Pain is a wave. It rises, it crashes, it disappears. But suffering is what happens when you hold the wave, when you try to stop it from dissolving. You say, this should not have happened. And in that clinging, the wound deepens. We imagine that if only life were different, if only people treated us better, if only the world were kinder, then we would never be hurt again. But that is not the way of things. The world is full of storms. People will betray you, people will reject you, people will misunderstand you. That is the nature of the play. The real question is not whether storms will come, but whether you will insist on being a house of glass in the middle of the hurricane, or whether you will discover that you are the air itself through which the storm moves, but which is never broken. This is why every attempt to make yourself untouchable through force, through hardness, through withdrawal, eventually fails, because the problem was never the storm. The problem was your identification with the house. You are not the fragile structure being battered by the wind. You are the space in which the wind blows. And if you see this, you realize something extraordinary. You cannot actually be hurt. Now, perhaps you think, that can't be true. I have felt pain, I have suffered, I have scars. Yes, of course, pain comes, like the rain, but rain cannot drown the sky. Storms cannot scar the space through which they pass. Your awareness, your true being, is untouched by events. Only the image of yourself, the little mask you cling to, feels wounded. Imagine a mirror. People can stand in front of it, they can smile, they can frown, they can curse at it, they can praise it, but the mirror itself is unaffected. It does not become more beautiful when someone smiles into it, nor does it become ugly when someone spits at it. The reflections come and go. The mirror remains. So it is with you. The insults, the betrayals, the losses, these are reflections, temporary, passing. But you, as awareness itself, are untouched. The tragedy is that we spend our lives trying to fix the reflections, not realizing we are the mirror. We polish the mask, defend it, hide it, parade it, and we suffer endlessly because masks can be damaged, images can be torn, but the awareness behind them cannot. You have never been wounded at your core. You have only believed in wounds. And when you begin to see this, something shifts. You realize that the hurt you carry is a story about what should or should not have happened, and stories can be released. This is why the old masters say, drop the burden, drop the mask, let go of the story. You think you are protecting yourself with armor, but the armor is what makes you heavy. You think you are preserving your dignity by holding on to the wound, but the wound is what keeps you from being free. Letting go does not mean pretending it didn't happen. It means seeing that it does not define you. It means realizing that what you are is deeper than any event, any insult, any betrayal. The ocean does not fear the storm. It allows it, embraces it, swallows it whole. And when the storm is gone, the ocean remains vast, deep, untouched. You are that ocean. So if you have been hurt, and surely you have, remember this: the pain is not a proof of your weakness, but an invitation to see where you are clinging. And if you dare to look deeper, you may find that beneath the wound, beneath the story, beneath the mask, there is something that has never been touched at all. That is who you are. And from that place, you will see that no one and nothing can truly hurt you. There comes a moment when you begin to see that what you thought was strength was actually fear. The armor you wore was not a sign of courage, but of trembling. The mask you carried was not self-expression, but self-protection. And when you glimpse this, you may feel naked, exposed, as though you have stripped away the only thing keeping you safe. But here is the secret. What you stripped away was not safety at all. It was the very weight that kept you drowning. We believe that by closing ourselves off, we will avoid hurt. But notice what happens when you close your heart. Yes, you may avoid rejection, but you also avoid intimacy. Yes, you may avoid betrayal, but you also avoid trust. Yes, you may avoid loss, but you also avoid love. And so, in trying to escape pain, you also escape joy. In avoiding hurt, you avoid life itself. Is this not a strange bargain? To trade the vastness of living for the narrow safety of a cage? But here is the paradox. When you open yourself fully, when you stop resisting the storms, you discover that nothing can truly touch you. Not because you have hardened, but because you have discovered the part of you that was never fragile to begin with. This is what the mystics call the ground of being, the Tao, the Atman, the self beyond the self. It is not something you achieve. It is not something you build. It is what you already are, and it is untouchable. Think of water. It can be struck, cut, divided, beaten, and yet it yields. It flows around obstacles. It takes the shape of any container, and when the container is gone, it returns to its own form. You cannot hurt water. You can only change its shape for a moment. Or think of the sky. Planes may cut through it, clouds may thunder, storms may rage, but the sky itself is never harmed. It does not carry scars. It does not remember insults. It is open, boundless, unmarked. This is what you are, not the passing events, not the insults, not the betrayals, not the fleeting stories. You are the awareness in which all of this arises, the open sky in which the storms of life play for a little while. But we forget this. And in forgetting, we suffer. We think, they hurt me, they betrayed me, they broke me. But who is this me that was broken? Is it not simply a story, an image? Your real being cannot be betrayed because it is not dependent on others. It cannot be broken because it has no parts. It cannot be abandoned because it is the very ground on which all relationships play. The one who is hurt is the mask, but the mask is not you. And here comes the great reversal. When you stop clinging to the mask, when you stop believing you are the fragile self-image, the very possibility of being hurt dissolves. This does not mean you become cold or indifferent. On the contrary, you become more alive, more open, more tender. Because now you are no longer afraid. You can love without fear of loss, because you see that loss cannot touch your essence. You can trust without fear of betrayal, because betrayal cannot wound your being. You can live without fear of death, because death cannot end what you truly are. Imagine this, a mirror. A child may stand in front of it, laughing, making silly faces. Later, an angry man may stand in front of it, shouting, spitting, cursing, but the mirror remains untouched. It reflects, it allows, but it is never stained. You are that mirror. The events of your life are reflections. They come, they go, they pass. But you, as awareness itself, remain unstained. To live from this realization is to become untouchable, not because nothing ever happens, but because nothing leaves a scar. The waves come, the waves go. The ocean remains. And this is the ultimate freedom. Because once you see that no one can truly hurt you, you stop living in fear. And when fear dissolves, love arises naturally. You no longer close yourself off. You no longer carry the heavy armor. You no longer resist the storms. Instead, you allow them, you dance with them, you even laugh at them. This is what it means to be free. Not the absence of pain, but the absence of resistance. Not the promise that storms will never come, but the discovery that storms cannot harm the sky. Now, let us return to where we began. You have been hurt. Of course you have. Every human being has. But what if those hurts were not what you thought they were? What if they were invitations? Invitations to see more deeply into yourself? The betrayal that shattered your heart, perhaps it was showing you that your heart cannot truly be shattered. The insult that burned in your mind, perhaps it was revealing that the one you thought you were is only a mask. The loss that left you in grief, perhaps it was pointing you to the part of you that cannot be lost. Seen this way, every hurt becomes a doorway. Every wound becomes a teacher. Every scar becomes a reminder, not of fragility, but of the indestructible being that you are. And so, the question is not, how do I protect myself from hurt? The question is, who is it that I think is being hurt? Look there. Look closely. You will find that the one you thought was so vulnerable, so fragile, so easily broken, is only a shadow, a story, a passing reflection. The real you, the awareness in which all of this arises, is untouchable. And if you truly see this, then the great burden lifts, the armor falls away, the mask dissolves, and you walk through life light, open, free. Yes, storms will come, people will betray, insult, misunderstand, reject. But these are only clouds passing through the vastness of your sky, and the sky remains. So the next time you feel hurt, remember, the hurt is a story, the pain is a wave. Let it come, let it go. And in the quiet after the storm, you will notice you were never truly touched. You were never truly broken. You were never truly harmed. You have always been the open sky, the vast ocean, the mirror that cannot be stained. And in this realization, you will find a freedom beyond anything you ever imagined, because no one and nothing can truly hurt you. There are moments in life that seem to shimmer differently from all the others. You meet someone, and for reasons that defy logic, the air between you feels charged with something ancient. The conversation flows as if it has always been happening. The silences are full instead of awkward, and their presence feels less like discovery and more like remembrance. You can't quite explain it, but you know it. You know them, though you have never met. It isn't about attraction in the usual sense. It isn't even about similarity. It's something deeper, quieter, a kind of recognition that bypasses thought. You feel it in the way your body relaxes around them, the way your mind stops performing. In their gaze, you don't feel judged, but seen, not admired, but known. Most people mistake this feeling for romance, for destiny, for the long-awaited other half. But what you are really experiencing is the universe recognizing itself through two of its expressions. When two awakened souls meet, what passes between them is not ownership, but awareness. You see, awakening strips away the masks that most people wear. It dissolves the stories we tell ourselves about who we should be and how others should perceive us. And when those stories are gone, what's left is naked, being simple, luminous consciousness. So when two beings who are awake to that truth meet, they see not personas, but presence. The illusion of separation flickers and, for a moment, disappears. It's not that you fall in love, it's that love falls into you. Awakened connection is not built through effort. It happens by resonance. Just as two tuning forks vibrate together when one is struck, two beings who are attuned to life's depth naturally harmonize. They don't complete each other, they reveal each other. Each becomes a mirror in which the other can see what is already whole. The ego doesn't know what to do with this kind of meeting. It tries to name it, to contain it, to turn it into a narrative. It calls it fate or twin flame or cosmic purpose. But the truth is simpler and more mysterious than that. When you stand before another and feel that inexplicable recognition, You are witnessing consciousness remembering itself. There's a story I like to tell. A wave once looked across the ocean and saw another wave approaching. "You look familiar," it said. "Perhaps we've met before." The other wave laughed and said, "Of course we have. We've never been apart." That is what happens when two awakened souls meet. They see through the forms and remember the sea. At first, the experience can feel overwhelming. You may feel a rush of emotion, a sense of intensity that your mind can't label. That's because awareness, when reflected, amplifies itself. The presence of another conscious being draws forth what is dormant in you. You begin to see parts of yourself you had forgotten: tenderness, vulnerability, peace. This can be beautiful, but also unsettling. The ego fears transparency. It prefers the safety of roles and masks. When faced with someone who sees beyond them, it trembles. That trembling isn't a warning, it's a purification. It's life asking, are you willing to be seen completely? If you are, something miraculous unfolds. The boundaries soften, not in the sense of merging, but in the sense of openness. You realize that real intimacy is not about becoming one person. It's about realizing you were never two. That's the paradox of awakened connection. It deepens individuality while dissolving separation. Each person remains distinct, yet both recognize the same awareness behind the distinction. It's like two mirrors reflecting each other into infinity, endless, spacious, and free. In such presence, words become unnecessary. Conversation still happens, but it carries a different weight. Silence speaks louder than language. The need to impress fades. You start to listen, not to reply, but to hear the universe speaking through both of you. There's no desire to hold or keep the other, because what you value isn't their form, but their being. You see that even if the body's part, the awareness you share is continuous. That's why these connections, once experienced, never truly end. The people may move away, the story may change, but the recognition remains imprinted in consciousness. And so you begin to understand that what the universe brings together, it doesn't always keep together in form. It doesn't promise permanence, only truth. The purpose of meeting an awakened soul is not to possess them, but to remember who you are through them. When you grasp that, the anxiety of attachment dissolves. You no longer need to define the relationship, to protect it, to make it fit an image. You let it be what it is, a sacred intersection in the vast unfolding of being. Sometimes that intersection lasts a lifetime. Sometimes it lasts a moment. But in eternity, the length doesn't matter. 1 second of true recognition outweighs years of polite familiarity. And even if you never meet again, the meeting has already fulfilled its purpose. It has shown you the face of awareness in another form. It has reminded you that love, in its highest expression, is not about merging or clinging. It's about seeing clearly and allowing freely. You begin to notice that this recognition can happen anywhere, with a stranger on a train, a child, an animal, even a fleeting encounter that leaves no trace. It's the same universe winking at itself, saying, I'm still here. In that realization, loneliness dissolves. You see that the awakened soul is not a rare being hidden somewhere in the world. Every person is that soul, sleeping or stirring, waiting for the right moment to open their eyes. And when they do, the meeting happens again, not between two people, but within the vastness that contains them both. When awareness meets awareness, something changes in the air. You can feel it, even if you can't explain it. There's a softness, as though time slows down just enough for eternity to peek through. You stop thinking about who you are supposed to be and simply exist as you are. It's not dramatic. It's not mystical fireworks. It's more like coming home to a place you never knew you'd left. And that homecoming doesn't depend on the other person. They may have sparked it, but what they really did was remind you of yourself. You begin to see that all love, in its deepest sense, is self-recognition. Not the small self that worries and strives, but the vast awareness that has always been quietly watching. When you love someone who is awake, you're really loving the presence that both of you share. This kind of meeting doesn't follow the usual human script. There are no guarantees, no promises to fulfill, no expectations to satisfy. You don't meet to complete each other, you meet to reflect each other. The relationship, whatever form it takes, becomes a sacred mirror. You start to see where you still cling, where you still hide, where you still confuse attachment for love. Sometimes that reflection can be uncomfortable. The other person may stir up parts of you that you thought were resolved. That's because awareness, by its nature, illuminates. When two awakened souls meet, every shadow is invited to surface, not for judgment, but for integration. It's like two candles placed near each other. Their flames grow brighter, and the darkness has no choice but to retreat. And yet, in that brightness, there is gentleness. True recognition doesn't demand, it doesn't need to control or claim. It simply allows. You can feel the difference. Possession feels heavy, while awareness feels weightless. When you look into the eyes of someone who truly sees you, there's no hunger in their gaze. There's space, the kind of space that lets you breathe freely, that invites you to be exactly as you are. You start to understand why the universe arranges such meetings. It's not to give you a perfect companion or to fix your loneliness. It's to remind you of the unity behind all appearances. Through the reflection of another, you remember that everything you seek has always been within you. That realization is both humbling and liberating. Because once you see it, you can never unsee it. The world starts to glow differently. Every encounter becomes an echo of that recognition. You begin to sense the sacred in everyone, even those who are still asleep to their own light. You look at them and think, ah, there you are, just not awake yet. And you realize how patient the universe really is. It allows every soul to awaken in its own time, through its own experiences. Some awaken through beauty, some through heartbreak, some through silence. But the destination is always the same, the rediscovery of being. When you understand that, love ceases to be personal, it expands. You no longer love people for who they are to you. You love them for what they are in truth, expressions of the same consciousness wearing different masks. The boundaries blur, and compassion becomes effortless. You stop needing to be understood, and instead, you start to understand. That's the strange and beautiful thing about awakening. It doesn't make you special. It makes you ordinary, but in the most miraculous way. You no longer stand apart from the world. You blend with it. You taste the oneness that mystics and poets have always tried to describe. And yet, you can still enjoy the play of individuality. You still laugh, cry, fall in love, and lose things. You still feel the human heartbeat, but now it pulses in rhythm with everything else. When you meet another awakened soul, that rhythm harmonizes for a while, like two notes in perfect tune, and when they part, the song continues in a different key. It's not about holding on, it's about listening. Listening to the music of connection without demanding it play forever. Some meetings are a single verse, others are an entire symphony. Both are complete, both are sacred. The universe has a peculiar way of arranging such encounters. You don't plan them, you don't predict them, and you certainly don't control them. They happen in the same way that flowers bloom or waves rise spontaneously, without permission. And just as naturally, they fade when the time is right. If you can accept that rhythm, you'll never feel abandoned. You'll understand that the universe doesn't take people away, it changes the form of the connection. The awareness you share remains untouched, like light passing through different windows. The glass changes, the light does not. And so, when two awakened souls meet, there's no need to grasp, no need to mourn, no need to define. You simply recognize the miracle, bow to it, and let it flow. That recognition is enough to transform your whole understanding of relationship. You see, that awakening isn't just a solitary journey, it's relational. Every meeting, every reflection, every exchange of energy is part of the unfolding. And through these reflections, awareness deepens its understanding of itself. Even separation in this light becomes sacred, because the moment you stop clinging, you start to perceive the subtle thread that connects all things. You realize that love never leaves. It only changes its language. So when you meet someone and feel that quiet recognition, don't rush to label it. Don't trap it in words like soulmate or destiny. Just be still and let it reveal its lesson. The universe is using that person as a mirror to show you your own depth. And when the reflection fades, thank it, bow to it, because it has done what it came to do, to remind you that awareness is never alone. That's the secret. The universe doesn't bring two awakened souls together to make them one. It brings them together so they can see that they always were. There is a quiet humor in the way the universe arranges things. It hides itself in countless forms, pretending not to know what it is. And then, every so often, two of those forms look at each other and remember. That remembrance is not dramatic. It's subtle, like sunlight finally reaching a corner of the room that's been in shadow all morning. You don't say, "Ah, the light has come." You simply notice that everything looks clearer. When two awakened souls meet, that clarity deepens. Each becomes a mirror in which the other can see the movement of awareness itself. The mirror does not add anything, it only reflects what is already there. But in the reflection, the mystery becomes visible. You begin to sense that what you call me and what you call you are two ripples on the same sea, two ways the universe is tasting its own existence. The mind resists this at first. It likes definitions. It wants to say, you are over there and I am over here, and our connection must mean something specific. But awareness smiles at the mind's confusion. It knows that what appears as two is actually one, playing hide and seek. The very act of seeking each other is how consciousness enjoys its own diversity. Think of a mirror facing another mirror. Between them, reflections multiply into infinity. No single image can claim to be the original, yet each one contains the same light. When you look into the eyes of another awakened being, you are seeing that infinity, an endless play of forms, revealing the same source. This realization changes the flavor of love. It becomes less like hunger and more like recognition. You don't reach out to take, you relax into seeing. Love stops being an effort and turns into awareness resting in itself. You no longer say, I love you as possession, but as observation. I see the same light moving there. And when you see that light clearly, judgment dissolves. The need to compare, to demand, to shape others into your image fades. How could you insist that another wave be higher or lower than yours when you both rise from the same ocean? Compassion becomes natural, not as a moral virtue, but as a direct understanding. The suffering of another is no longer foreign. It is your own reflection asking to be understood. Awakened relationship, then, is not about agreement or shared beliefs. It's about shared seeing. You could disagree entirely on politics, taste, or temperament, yet still feel the deep resonance that comes from recognizing the same ground of being. Beneath all the movement of personality, there is a stillness you both inhabit. When you rest there together, even silence becomes a conversation. That silence teaches you something that words cannot. Presence is enough. You realize that most of your interactions in life were attempts to fill silence because silence felt empty. But when awareness meets awareness, silence feels full. You could sit beside each other for hours, saying nothing, and still feel complete. It's as though time pauses to listen. People often ask, how do I find someone awakened? But that very question hides the answer. You cannot find awareness outside yourself. You can only recognize it. And recognition happens naturally when you're no longer seeking completion. When you stop demanding the world to fill your emptiness, you discover that everyone you meet becomes a potential reflection. The awakened companion may not appear as you imagine. They might be a stranger on a bus, a child, a teacher, or even a brief passerby. But the essence of the meeting is always the same: awareness glimpsing itself. Such meetings are gifts, not possessions. They are reminders, and like all reminders, they vanish once their purpose is fulfilled. To cling to them is to lose the lesson they carried. The universe will sometimes bring someone into your life only long enough for you to remember what you already are. When that memory settles, the person may drift away, and that is not a loss, it's a completion. Of course, the heart still aches when form departs. Even the awakened heart feels grief. But awareness transforms grief into gratitude. You begin to thank existence for lending you another mirror, even for a moment. You see that love is never wasted, because love was never between two. It was the movement of the one appearing as two. And so, the mirror of awareness does its work quietly. It shows you where you are still hiding. It reveals the subtle clinging to identity, the small fears that whisper, I must hold on. But when you look closely, you see that even those fears are part of the dance. The mirror reflects everything, not only light but shadow, because both belong to wholeness. There will be times when another awakened soul challenges you, not through argument, but through presence. Their stillness might unsettle you. Their acceptance might disarm you. That is the mirror at work. Awareness is showing you the places where you still contract, where you still resist being seen. Let those reflections soften you instead of frighten you. The more completely you allow yourself to be seen, the freer you become. Over time, you notice that the need for particular mirrors fades. You no longer wait for the universe to bring you someone special because you've discovered that the mirror was never external. The world itself becomes your companion. Every sound, every face, every gust of wind reflects the same consciousness back to you. Life becomes an ongoing conversation between the infinite and itself. And in that realization, the old idea of loneliness loses its grip. You may live alone, you may walk through a crowded city, but you are never isolated. The same awareness that once met you through another now meets you through everything. The raindrop on the window, the laughter of a stranger, the breath moving in your chest, all of it whispers the same message. I am here, I am you, I have always been. When you live from that space, relationships transform. You don't enter them out of need, but out of joy. You meet others not to complete yourself, but to celebrate the shared being that already is complete. You can love fully without fear, because you know that even if form changes, the essence remains untouched. The mirror cannot break. It can only change what it reflects. This understanding also brings humility. You realize that awakening doesn't make you better than anyone else. It simply makes you transparent. You become a clear window through which life shines unobstructed. And when another soul looks through that window, they might recognize their own clarity. In that sense, awakening is contagious, not because you teach it, but because you are it. Sometimes the universe arranges two such transparent beings to cross paths for a while. Their presence amplifies each other, creating a small field of peace that ripples outward. You can feel this when you're near them, a calm that doesn't need explanation. They don't preach, they simply exist, and their existence changes the atmosphere. But the universe is playful. It doesn't allow stagnation, even in enlightenment. Eventually, those paths diverge again. The mirrors move apart, and each continues, reflecting the infinite in new ways. And that, too, is perfect. When you understand this, you stop asking, will it last? Because you see that it already has. Every true meeting is eternal in its essence. The form may dissolve, but the awareness that recognized itself through that meeting never fades. In dreams, in memory, in subtle intuition, the resonance continues. It's the universe reminding you, nothing real can be lost. So, what happens when the universe brings two awakened souls together? Nothing and everything. On the surface, perhaps two people share a conversation, a walk, a moment of laughter. Beneath the surface, the infinite meets itself and smiles. The smile is enough. You might not even realize until later that something inside you shifted. The world feels lighter, your heart more spacious, your mind less defensive. That is how the mirror works quietly, without drama. It doesn't change what you are, it reveals it. And once revealed, you can never return to pretending. You may forget for a time, you may get caught again in stories and striving, but somewhere inside, the remembrance remains. Every future meeting, every glimpse of beauty, will echo that first recognition, I am the one I was seeking. Eventually, you stop distinguishing between spiritual and ordinary encounters. The sacred seeps into everything. The cashier's smile, the rhythm of rain, the breath between thoughts, all mirrors, all teachers. The universe never stopped bringing awareness together. You just stopped noticing. Now you see that the entire cosmos is an endless conversation between awakened souls, each reflecting the same light through different eyes. So, when another comes into your life and you feel that spark of familiarity, treat it as a blessing, not a mission. Don't rush to label it. Don't demand that it stay. Simply bow inwardly and say, ah, there you are again. Then let life decide how long the dance will last. Because the meeting itself is the message. To see yourself reflected so clearly, even for an instant, is to remember eternity. And in that remembrance, all seeking ends. You realize that there were never two awakened souls, only one awareness, meeting itself in infinite forms, smiling through countless eyes,